So inventory has actually come down for 4 weeks in a row now. Prices seem to be staying stuck relatively high, and the number of price reductions happening every week has actually been coming down. And these three things don't add up to what we expect in a strong buyer's market, and we feel like this is supposed to be a buyer's market right now. So what's going on? Let's check it out with the numbers and the nuance. I'm Christopher McGee. I'm the owner of Halcyon Real Estate. Halcyon Real Estate is affiliated with the Keller Williams Market Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. Today is the 13th, yes, the 13th of November, 2023, and this is the numbers and the nuance. This is where you come every Monday. Weekly data from the MLS, just the raw numbers. I plot the chart and I make it all available for you here to make decisions with, and then I tell you what I'm reading in those charts and numbers so you can have a professional's grasp on what's going on in Utah's housing market. So let's hit it. Let's look at last week's numbers, and just remember, if you want a better detailed explanation of what each of these numbers mean, you can look at my weekly real estate numbers explained video flagged at the top right of your screen right now, and you can be solid on what all of this means in a little more detail. But let's go ahead and hit these numbers from last week. Okay, so our current inventory sits at 9,457, which is down from the previous week, and it's the fourth week in a row that it's come down. But as we look at it from the beginning of the third quarter to now, just how we look at all these numbers, the beginning of the previous quarter to now, and we still see it trending up. Average days on market now sits at 51, which is down just a couple days from the previous week. And then we still see this trending up as well. Average list price last week came to $726,123. That's up significantly from the previous week, and this is trending up over time. If we look carefully at that graph over the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, we see that it's been kind of stuck about where it is. It's come down, it's come back up, but it's not plummeting, and it's not still trending up from the few weeks back if we look at it from that point. But we do see it trending up from the beginning of the third quarter. And our average sold price this prior week was $713,077, and so the difference between average list and average sold price gives us a difference of $13,046 in the buyer's favor, which is up from the previous week, but we still see this trending down deeper into territory that favors the buyers. The number of homes sold last week came to 379, which is a sharp move back down from the 568 that we had in the previous week. We can see this is trending down. Number of homes we have sitting currently under contract right now comes to 3,912, down from the previous week by just about 40, and clearly still trending down. The number of price reductions, the number of times last week that sellers decided they needed to chop their prices down in order to attract a buyer and go under contract, that happened 982 times last week, so back down under the 1,000 mark, but it seems like it's stuck hovering around the 1,000 mark for the last couple of months. And lastly, the number of times in the prior week that a listing contract was either canceled or expired or withdrawn. Remember, the lion's share of that is always those listing contracts that expire. In all, that happened 354 times this prior week, which is sharply down from its typical first of the month high that we had last week, but we can see this trending up over time as well. Okay, so the nuance here. So I pointed out three numbers at the very beginning, the intro of this video, that are going counterintuitively, either stuck at not in favor of the buyer, but not really in favor of the seller either, or seem to be moving in the direction of in favor of the seller, where with interest rates where they are, and with the seasonal shift into cold weather and the holidays, we expect things to be pushing in favor of the buyer. Well, I'll break this down just a little bit more in a moment here, but in sum, I do think that everything is still pushing in favor of the buyer. I think that's what the overall pressure is. But let's break some of these things down. So I mentioned at the beginning that our listings, our active inventory, the number of homes that you can go out and buy because they're available right now and on the market, that active listings number has been coming back down. And it's when it's traveling up that number shows to be in favor of the buyers. What's happening now is, yes, it's true, we can see the days on market trending up, so things are staying on market longer. You would expect that if new homes are being added to the pool of available homes at the same pace and things stay on the market longer, we would continue to see inventory rising. And what's happening is new listings are not being added at the same pace. They are our new listings data is diminishing. So just look with me for a moment at this chart from the MLS. This shows three different things going on here, but what I want to focus on is the new listings data. So the bars in this graph, not the lines, but the green bars in this graph show us monthly new listings data. If you go all the way to the far left of this graph, the second to the far left shows us December of 2021, a low point there, and the next low point from there is December of 2022. And on the far right is the current month of November, which obviously isn't finished yet, so that bar graph isn't done being built. But you can see a couple of things. One, that December is always the month with the fewest active listings added to our pool of listings. And you can see that November and the cold winter months in general tend to funnel down toward December at the bottom, but November we wouldn't expect a whole lot of new listings added to our pool either. You can also see, if you look at the large lump that represents the peak of 2022, May through June in 2022, those new listings added, you can see that that bump is significantly higher than the bump throughout 2023. So all through this last year, we've had fewer new listings added to the pool than we had in the previous year. This is an issue throughout the entire country right now. We've done pretty well with it in Utah, but just so you know, our new listings added to the market all year have been relatively low, and right now we're looking at moving toward their lowest point of the year. And that's what's happening with our listings data right now. Things are staying on the market marginally longer, but we're having fewer new listings added to the pool. As for our average prices seeming to be stuck relatively high, I do think that this is temporary. I think that once we look at this data from the beginning of the fourth quarter to the end of it, that this will be a number that's trending down overall. It's important to remember too that even as our average list price seems to be staying stuck around 700,000, the number that shows the difference between average list and average sold price is gaining marginal depth in favor of the buyer. If we look at the trend line for average list versus average sold, on the far left of that graph, we see that looking from the beginning of the third quarter, that number started around $7,000 to $8,000 in the buyer's favor, and we see that it's trended down to the other side of the 10,000 mark to being now closer to, on average, $12,000, $13,000 in favor of the buyer. So if list prices are staying relatively stuck for the moment, I anticipate them continuing to come down throughout this quarter and probably through the next. At least the average sold price is getting a little bit lower than that average list price, which seems to momentarily be stuck. As for the number of price reductions that are happening per week being stuck or even coming down, where in a buyer's market we expect the number of times a seller would be chopping off their prices to increase every week, I think this is also temporary, and that once we look at this chart from the beginning of the fourth quarter moving on down to the end of the fourth quarter, I think this will continue to be a number that trends up. Nevertheless, I think what it shows is that the demand for homes in Utah is still high enough, and the days on market is not yet long enough for sellers to make sense of chopping their list prices too dramatically or too often. So as I said, all told, I do believe the pressure continues to be in favor of buyers in our Utah housing market right now. That just doesn't mean that it's a waterfall of home prices in Utah, and I don't think it will be. That prices will come down slowly over the next 2 quarters is still my prediction, and I'll be here every Monday to keep myself accountable to that prediction. We'll just see where it goes and stay on top of it. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, if you or anybody you know is thinking to move in or around Utah in the coming months, I hope you'll reach out to me, because you want an agent who cares about their fiduciary responsibilities, always wants to represent you in your best interests, someone who knows the market well, and someone who communicates very well, all things I strive to do. So feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to help you or whoever it is you know that's thinking to move. And of course, if you'd like to stay educated on Utah's housing market, there's not going to be a better way than to hit that subscribe and come here with me every Monday to see how our Utah housing market is moving. I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.